Great. Good. Welcome everybody to this meetup. Today we are going to talk about the OWASP Threat Modeling Playbook that was basically donated from Toreon to the OWASP community and to the open source community, which is a really good thing. I appreciate it very much. I do threat modeling as well in my job, and what I miss a bit about this is, around threat modeling, there's always a little bit of an air of mystery, is what I call it. People tell you you should just do it, just get started. There's no real way. There's not one way to do it. There's hundreds of ways to do it. You can develop your own thing, but still, I do think and do believe that it does need some guidance especially for people who are new to this area or develop software and have never done a threat model before. That's why I personally appreciate very much that you and your company donate this to OWASP and to the open source community, because I think it's very helpful to have some guidance, even though it's not maybe the one way to do it, but just give me one way to do it and maybe I will adapt this one to my needs. So I think this is very, very helpful. So we have with us today Sebastien Deleersnyder. He is from Toreon, Belgium. I always call him the SBA Research of Belgium because we do similar things. For those of you who have attended the threat modeling workshop at Sec4Dev this year in February, Stephen Weirks, colleague of Seba, they are from the same company and they are specializing in this field of expertise. So please welcome Sebastien Deleersnyder.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for having me again, indeed. Before I start the presentation, I want to explain what the goal really is. So, as Thomas said, threat modeling is something I hope you already have a little bit of an idea what it is about. I'm going to do a small introduction, but it's a fundamental building block of developing secure products and/or software. And we do it indeed, like Thomas said, there's numerous ways to do it, and there's a lot of benefits of doing threat modeling. But what we see, and from also what we hear from our experiences when we do training around threat modeling, and also at customers, is that there's a couple of problems with regards to scaling this up or starting this up as I would say, serious practice within an organization. And we've seen that a lot. And as part of our yearly Black Hat update of the training this year, so in 2020, we created a threat modeling playbook to help organizations to start it up as a practice. And after we developed it, we looked at it and said, okay, let's do more with this than just deliver this to our customers. And we decided to donate this to the OWASP community to have an impact beyond, I would say, our customer base. With really the goal and what I really want you to do, if you see this, for you to use it, to apply this to your own practice and to provide us with feedback and provide the OWASP community with feedback that what works, what doesn't work, because we're pretty sure that there's a couple of aspects that still can be improved of the threat modeling playbook, and that together as a community we can improve the next release of the threat modeling playbook for future organizations and to improve product security. So that's the goal, and that's also the goal of I would say of this presentation. And let me share my screen so that you can all see this. So if everything's well, you should be able to see my screen. And just put it like this. So the OWASP project is the OWASP Threat Modeling Playbook. So what I'm going to explain you is, you can already have a look at it if you're, I would say, really curious. The GitHub link is here, and if you Google OWASP Threat Modeling Playbook, you'll find it quite easily. I'm going to provide you with a small introduction on threat modeling, but that's not the goal of this session. I'm going to explain why a playbook format is an interesting way of starting up threat modeling as a practice, and I'm going to go over the different steps that we think threat modeling should be introduced as a practice within an organization, starting with stakeholder buy-in, embedding it in your organization processes, and then covering the people process technology, I would say, approach in embedding and starting up threat modeling. And then obviously I'm going to talk a little bit about open sourcing it. I'm also going to show you where you can find it and go do a little bit of a walkthrough, and it will definitely make sure that there's room for Q&A. So with that, threat modeling is really the activity of not only identifying potential risks, potential design flaws or vulnerabilities in your software or applications, but also the next act of, okay, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to manage system risk or application risk? Because threat modeling as an activity itself, can compare this a little bit with pen testing. The pen testing part is fun, but you want to have an impact. You want to have like, okay, what are we going to do with the results? Threat modeling is also about, okay, what are we going to do with the outcome of the threat modeling activity? And that is to manage and to decide what to do in terms of security choices with software. It's part of what we call a secure development lifecycle. And here you have a very, I would say, high level and simplified way of looking at software development, where you have typical phases of designing software, building or pulling together code, testing, hopefully your release, and the majority of your software is going to run in an operations environment. And typically nowadays, this is in iterations of sprints or even like in very short DevOps releases. And in each of these phases, from a security point of view, things go wrong or can go wrong. You might have security configuration issues, might have source code bugs, or you might have design flaws. And that means that for each of these security issues, you will have several different aspects or activities to cover those security issues. And so configurations issues are covered with application firewalls, with configuration guidelines. Coding bugs are typically covered with coding guidelines, training developers, source code review, testing it, not only the code, but also when you deploy it in an active environment. The problem is with design flaws, security choices when you think of a new release or a new functionality, or when you design a new interface to your software, or you're going to pull together functionality. There's a lot of choices to be made that have security impact and security implications. And there, threat modeling is the activity that provides you with guidance on how to think about your software in terms of what can go wrong, what are the threats to my system, but also what kind of mitigations am I going to build in to cover the threats that are real for my application. And that's threat modeling. And threat modeling as an activity is really, I would say, the most interesting activity as part of design, but you can also do it later on. And also understand that it's best done when focusing on design flaws or finding issues within security architecture. Other activities are more focused on coding bugs and configuration, I would say, issues. Now, high level, and these are, I would say, based on the 4-question model that you can also find in Adam Shostak's book on threat modeling. Typically, there are 4 questions. What are we building? And that is covered with diagramming your software. What can go wrong in terms of what are potential threats to my system? What are we going to do about this? Selecting mitigations or controls within your system to cover the threats that you've identified, and learning from this activity. Did we do a good enough job? Is this my threat model good? Was the activity good? What can we do to learn in our next iteration? And those are the typical threat modeling stages you go through. Now, there's a whole lot of benefits and advantages of doing threat modeling. One of the biggest side effects and also one of the biggest outcomes of doing threat modeling, which is typically a team or a collaboration activity of the people that are involved or in creating your software, is you get the team on the same page with a shared vision on security. That's one of the biggest benefits in itself. Obviously, you are also able to identify your design flaws, and you can focus on the biggest risks that are effectively there for your software, and it increases awareness and understanding on those. Also, once you do threat modeling, you'll quickly find out that you have a lot of potential activities or security controls to build in. But when done right, you should be able to risk rate them and see what are the most important ones to cover and to prioritize, I would say, your time and or money to focus on the ones that are really truly important for your system. And in itself, the threat modeling activity is a justification or can justify any extra budget or cost that you think you would be necessary for building in security. In the end, any artifact, any outcome might be a picture of your whiteboard, might be a fully documented threat model, would also be very good if you, for a compliance need, you need to prove that you've done your homework in terms of technical risk analysis. Specifically for GDPR, when you're doing privacy by design, threat modeling your privacy risks would be a very, I would say, it would be an interesting extra activity on top of threat modeling, where you would benefit of having that documented whenever you need to prove that you've done that. And that's something that is necessary now with the GDPR regulation. So why aren't we all doing this if you all see all these benefits? Now, the problem there is there's quite some issues when to start up threat modeling in a scalable way within an organization. It typically requires outside security expertise that might be outside of your team or outside experts. It can take quite some time. It's typically till thinking time, putting people together in a meeting, which the hours will run up quickly. And also, and that is a fundamental problem, if you don't have a good system on doing threat modeling, it's very hard to reproduce the same kind of results done by different teams on the same kind of system, or to compare threat models of different teams to one another. And that is something you need to cover. Also, the tools, there are some, luckily there is some movement in the tooling market. Tools are getting better, I would say, in terms of threat modeling, but they're still quite limited. And overall, the whole process of doing threat modeling in a lot of organizations simply do not scale up, especially if you have bigger portfolios and applications of tens, hundreds, or even thousands of applications. It's just a very hard job. So that's where we thought, okay, we need to do something about this. And obviously we have some experience in helping customers in doing this. And what we've done is we pull together our experience of doing, I think we've done hundreds of threat models for customers. We've delivered a lot of trainings around this. And the knowledge of that pulled together with other experiences. Now, one of the interesting experiences, and also incidentally, one of the projects that I presented in an earlier presentation with SBA Research here, is software assurance maturity model. Now, the software assurance maturity model has threat modeling as a practice. And we already thought, okay, it would be interesting to have some kind of like step-by-step guidance on how to cover the maturity levels that are typically described in OWASP SAMM. What we've also looked at is that there's a couple of other interesting projects within OWASP that are a good example of how to introduce a certain activity. And there we've I would say, we took the playbook format from another project that is successful, which is called the Security Champions Playbook, which provides a guideline on how to start up a Security Champions program. And also, for instance, Steven Wirks, who did the training indeed in the beginning of this year, he's also active as a project leader of the threat modeling project within OWASP. So what we've done is we've took together all this knowledge, and also we created this as part of our training. And so we created a playbook. Now, why is a playbook interesting in as a format? It translates vision, and we have a certain vision and strategy. We have a certain strategy into a tactical approach for people and teams to do something. And when you look at how playbooks, for instance, are used within American football, it relates really well to threat modeling, because American football, a playbook it defines how you are going to set up your team and your tactics based on where you are. Are you in attacking mode? Are you in defending mode? Where are you in the field? The stage of the game. So you're going to do this all a little bit differently, and that's covered with playbooks. And that translates also really well to a threat modeling practice, because there also threat modeling is based on, do we have an understanding of what attackers potentially are going to do, and what are we going to do to defend against those attackers? And all in all, what we've also seen is that gamification of security is interesting to, I would say trick is maybe the bad word, but also to engage development teams into them to take a look at this, to try to understand it, to see, okay, how can we use this? And any way of gamifying, I would say, a certain security aspect for a development team will help the adoption. So that's how we came up with the threat modeling playbook. And this is actually the high-level overview of the playbook itself. And there's 5, I would say, stages where we first start to make sure, do we have stakeholder buy-in? That's the first step. You have to have that. Then, before diving into starting up threat modeling, you have to make sure that you build or that you embed the activity in your organization, specifically risk management processes. And then you can start up like the threat modeling part within the organization. And you first have to make sure that people are trained, that people understand what threat modeling is about, that you start up with the process, and only then can you start with, I would say, automating this, to add technology to this mix. Just that the people process technology approach. And what I'm going to present in the next couple of 20 minutes is for each of these stages, how this works and how you can do this. So we first start with stakeholder buy-in. We have to make sure that people who will be involved in threat modeling understand. Obviously, we need to make sure within the organization who is going to be typically involved, and that's not only the development team, but also management, application owners, product owners, architects, DevOps engineers, project managers. So these are all people that might be impacted by threat modeling. And you first have to understand, okay, what are your potential obstacles? Why would you be against this? But also explain what would be the benefits of doing threat modeling to each of them within their role. And once you have that buy-in, a second part of doing this is to select a strategy within or select an approach to do this within your organization. It depends a little bit on your organization, the size, the amount of resource that you have, because there's typically three choices. Either you do it yourself, which is perfectly possible. You hire an expert within the organization or externally, or you start with a training to understand what you're going to do. It might be a combination, but you have to select your approach. Once you have that, you can start up with the rest. Before doing it, what's really important, and also something that, for instance, in software assurance and maturity model is something we focus on, is that you measure what you're doing to be able to demonstrate return on investment. And that's quite hard with security. But what we've seen is once you start measuring your activities in terms of findings, in terms of issues that are being discovered whenever you have done threat modeling on your systems, is that you can find that typically you will find a lot of findings, but in the end you will see a trend, or you should see a trend of deployment issues going down. And there you can tangibly demonstrate your return on investment. And any system, any tickets system, or any tool that provides output or that can help you do this will be useful to create your dashboard for it. But it's something to keep in mind, and depending on your kind of organization, you'd want to start measuring it, because once you measure it, you can later on manage it. So once you have this in place, you start your next step. It's embedding this in your organization. And what's important here is that threat modeling is a technical risk analysis, which you would typically try to embed in your overall organization risk management process. Now, bigger organizations will have some sort of formal risk management process. Smaller organizations might not have this, but at a certain point in time, your organization, your CEO, your board of directors, your management will have some kind of way of handling risk. If that is not formally present, I would really recommend to have a look at the ISO 27005 standard, which describes information security risk management process. Because that is an overall methodology to do this, and technical risk analysis, threat modeling fits in there. And it links also the whole thing together in terms of people, process, and technology framework that we are going to describe later on. In a way that what we have here, and we've simplified the people, process, technology stages to the ISO 27005, where each of these activities are mapped on establishing context, doing risk treatment, communicating around this, and monitoring and reviewing your process as a whole. So, and what's important here is that once you have your threat modeling, you start on the threat modeling, is that you try to embed this in your overall organization way of working. That's, I would say, the first two big steps. The third step is to make sure that people understand what threat modeling really is about. Before doing that, you have to first identify who is going to be involved. This is one step further than doing the business case of getting the buy-in. Here, you make sure that the different roles that are going to be involved are motivated to participate in the actual activity of doing threat modeling and understanding what their role is in doing the threat modeling. A specific role that we think would be interesting, certainly if you have more, I would say, if you want to scale this up, is to have a threat modeling specialist role. This is a role that is quite new. We've created I would say, kind of like a job posting or an overall job profile description of what a threat modeling specialist might look like, describing responsibilities, tasks, and required skills and experience. For you to have a look at and to take and to see within the organization, is this something we can use or adapt, but also hire potential specialists within the organization or externally to the organization. But you will need someone or maybe a group of persons that will typically help the different teams to do the threat modeling. Important here is that they should really focus on making sure that the threat modeling is done by the teams and that they float within the teams or the squads to support them in doing it. We should make sure that it's not the bottleneck of doing all the threat modeling. That's for sure. Another step in this is to make sure that people that are involved in the threat modeling get some proper training. And you have to, I would say, make the distinction between developers who need to have like a basic understanding, so role-based, and the more like architects or product owners that will have a little bit of a different kind of training. What we see as a minimal threat modeling training curriculum, we set here, it should be at least like how do you embed this, like I've explained at the beginning, and to have a couple of basic methodologies, and to make sure that what's being learned is based on what your organization is doing in terms of like typical like of software technology stack, but also try to embed this in your project governance, your way of working, so that you have like a really adaptable training to your organization. That was the first step. So, and that will lead. There we've built the basis, the foundation of making sure that people understand what they can do and should be doing as part of threat modeling. Obviously, you need to make sure that you have some kind of way of doing the threat modeling. Now, in a lot of organizations, threat modeling is already done a little bit. This is not like the whole like the new holy grail. What you should already start with is to understand what you're doing, understand your current process of doing threat modeling. try to map it already on the Threat Modeling Playbook and on OWASP SAMM as a maturity level. And typically, you have to look at your process. Okay, what am I doing? When typically are we doing it? What are the inputs, outputs, steps taken? And draw that overview of what your threat modeling process already is. It might be nothing, it might be already something, and map it on the current threat modeling playbook here and see where your gaps are and how you can improve it. Now, an important aspect of doing this and doing threat modeling certainly in a scalable way is that you align the effort on the risk level or the risk posture of the different applications that you're going to apply it on. So in your application, I would say landscape, you might have like, if you have like 100 applications, probably 20 applications will be really important for you and would be put in the high risk bucket. 40 might be medium and 40 might be low risk. But you need to have some kind of like application risk level system and classification system to help you to select for what kind of application you're going to do what. And then you typically will choose a certain methodology to do this. There's a couple of methodologies out there, but what you need to do is to look at what's useful for you. And there's a couple of like basic requirements. It should be typically cover the 4 questions. It should be at least some scale up to your kind of organization that needs. But the best step to do is not to over-engineer this, but to select a methodology, a simple methodology to start with, and to start doing this in practice and to learn from that. And then later on, you can try and to improve that. But fit it in your overall process, see how you can reproduce this within different teams and start to learn from there. Like I explained in the beginning, you have to integrate this with the risk management framework because any threat model will have findings. There will be output of your threat model that there's a couple of aspects that you didn't think of that are not handled. And the output of there that you will need to map on business risk. And the business risks are typically based on probability and or impact on your organization. And here you see like a typical risk table. And if you already have a risk table, you can map it on there. If not, again, I would recommend to have a look at ISO 27005 to create your own based on this. The next step is that the outcome, so the findings, there will be follow-up actions that are decided upon. Make sure that it's always clear who is going to be accountable for doing this, and that you track progress and that you feed back to your updating your threat model, and that you check that the mitigation actually works. So that you keep track on all the follow-up actions. So this is, I would say, the more, I wouldn't say call it boring, but threat modeling itself is a fun activity. Making sure that it's acted upon is where you get the real impact. And that's where you're going to make the impact and prove the return on investment. And then you can start optimizing this. Optimize your methodology, optimize your risk calculation, reuse what your teams are already using or creating, hook also into and adapt other security activities like pen testing. Threat models are gold for a pen testing team. Make sure compliance needs are fed into your threat models, that your audit findings can feed back into future threat models. That you align this also on requirements in terms of service of quality of service, and that the input for other processes are given in terms of automation, training, awareness, and try to standardize the risk calculation across the teams as much as possible, that you can start comparing the results. So this was the biggest part. It's focused on the process, but there's a couple of key steps here. Once you have, I would say, sort of managed to cover those, then only then you should be looking at technology. And it's really about selecting the right tools and start with the basic stuff. Start with just like the tool between your ears, the flip charts, the whiteboards. Obviously, in current COVID days, you're going to cover like remote collaboration tools, like virtual whiteboards. but fits something that fits fits a tool that fits your methodology. Don't try to adapt your way of working to a tool. And there's definitely a lot of tools out there, open source tools, OWASP tools, but also commercial tools. And there's definitely a couple of good ones out there. Now, when you select your tool, make sure that basically it covers the basic primary functions and outputs of what your threat modeling activity is about, that you can create and collaborate, certainly now remotely also on threat models, and that you're able to persist and like bring back your threat models and update them, obviously, and that you can, and it supports like a risk-based approach. Nice to have aspects are awareness, documentation, sharing and integrating your threat model with other systems and so on. Also nowadays more and more important, since that tool is going to contain threats and known issues with your software that might be like something that you'd want to have a serious good like access control around and operation, make sure that it's secured as a tool itself. And that you integrate this in your overall, I would say, methodology of your dev teams, that you try to fit this in your pipeline of creating software. So I would say the real end game would be to go to what we call threat modeling as code. That whenever you change, update, or adapt code or systems, that you try to feed that back into your threat model, and that the threat model feeds back into the security activities to make sure that there is a full closed cycle of feedback. So that's I would say, the overall steps of doing threat modeling with a playbook. Now, it's a lot of, I would say, a lot of practical advice. And what we've done is we've written that down in a playbook format. And this is the overview, like I explained. And what we wanted to do is to also level up our game in essence, to not only share this with our customers, but also to share this with the community. So we really decided this to open source this as an open source and community project. So we donated this to OWASP, and we're also very happy that OWASP has accepted it as a formal OWASP project. So it's from now on the OWASP Threat Modeling Playbook. But we see this as a first step. We really want to make sure that you, I would say, and that the community can use this, but also provides us with feedback, and that we can start like a feedback cycle of the playbook itself to improve this, because I'm pretty sure it can be improved. We have some experience, but if we can combine, I would say, the world experience and the community experience in the next release, we are able to improve the playbook release version 2 to an even better playbook. So with that, I'm going to show you where you can find it. The project itself, if you look for, or if you Google OWASP Threat Modeling Playbook, and the links are in the presentation later on, you can find it here with the introduction of how it works. And currently, the playbook is deployed on a GitHub repository. It's the Toreon one. We're waiting for the OWASP repository, but that it shouldn't hold us back here. Where you can, what we've done is the playbook itself. We fully described each of the steps, and we've converted that to Markdown. And there's a PDF version. There's also the image here. But the documentation, the Markdown is available here, and it's you can go through it on GitHub. So every step is explained. When you go to the next page here, the stakeholder buy-in. So everything which I explained earlier on with the presentation is being explained more in detail on how to do that, what potential gains might be, what the expertise injection might be, how to do the return on investment, and then here the embedding. So all the information, everything that I explained here is available as Markdown. The advantage here is that you can just reuse the Markdown, feed on this, use it in any format that you'd like to adapt it to your own needs. and to apply this on your own, I would say, methodology of doing threat modeling and your own practice of doing threat modeling. Also, whenever you have issues or aspects that you want to cover here, you raise it as an issue, or you can create a pull request. We've already had pull requests of small typos that were fixed, and then we can just update this in on the repository and make it available. So it helps us to collaborate on the project as a whole. So that's where you find the source, I would say, of the playbook, and that's also the place where you can, I would say, download it and apply this on your own practices. So my question or my call to action here to you is use it, try it out, let us know what works. I'm pretty sure there's going to be things that can be improved. I've already had some feedback from other people over the last couple of months. So we're going to gather this and we're going to collaborate the next couple of months, and certainly next year, on a next release and next version to make sure that this gets better. So with that, I'm opening the floor for questions and answers. Any questions so far?
Cool. Thank you very much, Seba, for this very great presentation. Thanks for open sourcing that playbook. I think that's very helpful for many people. Before we go into question and answers, just for the people who are here, make sure to stick around because we're giving away a free ticket to the Sec4Dev conference after the Q&A. So we're giving away one ticket for this day 3 and day 4, so the talk section of Sec4Dev. And that's after the Q&A. What I wanted to add to your presentation before I get into the first questions, the key takeaway for me personally was that word, you had a sentence there, shared vision of security. And I think that's actually really something that's very important, because if I'm a developer as well, if I develop something or if I plan something, I might be doing some thinking about the security posture of the product, some thinking about threats or bugs that could be in there, or flaws that could be in there. But that's just for me. That's not necessarily shared vision of the security posture we need to have with the colleague that's sitting right beside me. So that's my personal key takeaway of this presentation, which is awesome. There's also a threat model on OWASP 2. It's an RFC. I didn't know that until recently. I did an integration for OpenID Connect in an application recently, or I'm still in progress. And I was thinking about potential threats, and then I found this RFC where it's an awesome list of threats in there. You can go through them and check your own application against them. This is really cool. And there's also a very good article on threat modeling introduction by Martin Fowler. I will share the link in the Meetup group as well with the other people. Cool. So with that, we will go into the questions. So Andreas has asked one question. He's asking, where and how would you recommend to integrate threat modeling into a usual Scrum process? Should it be done as its own separate ritual, or should it be a part of Scrum itself?
There's two ways to do this. And they should be done in parallel. In the Scrum process, you will split up the threat modeling activity also in smaller parts, and based on the stories that you're going to cover in the next sprint, typically, as I would say, as part of your planning part of that sprint, you're going to look at is it going to be necessary based on the stories to start the threat model or to update the threat model, and to make sure that there is some time planned to do this, and to make sure that you do that on that particular iteration, on that feature or on that specific user story. Because threat modeling can be done on small, I would say, aspects of the scope of your software. That is, I would say, what I would call like the in-flight Scrum threat modeling. It might make sense, certainly for more complex systems, to have a parallel threat modeling activity when I would say the different Scrum sprints are done on the overall system, and that you don't necessarily need to fit in a sprint itself. So to make sure that at least have like an overall view on the threat model of the system as a whole. That's the, I would say, the parallel way of making sure you cover, I would say, the majority of the threat model that you would do for a typical complex system.
So a classic thing where to do a smaller threat model in a smaller digestible part would be something like I just said, OpenID Connect integration, new thing. Threat model it or take the ready-made threat model that's there and integrate it yours. So just to get back about issues for the threat modeling playbook, you want the issues in the GitHub repo. Did I get that right?
Preferably, yes.
Preferably,
so if you have any, I would say, updates, there might be a typo, might be a suggestion for an update, might be even a question. Just raise an issue in the GitHub and we'll cover it from there. Yes. There's also but I think I'm going to cover that. We also have a very active OWASP threat modeling community on the OWASP Slack workspace. And there's a specific threat modeling channel there. There's a lot of people that are active there, but I think I have that added in one of the next slides.
If you pass over the link that we can use to get into that Slack channel, I can post it in the Meetup group as well.
Yeah, I will do that.
Thomas is asking a question: how comprehensive should an initial threat model be?
It should cover at least the biggest, I would say, flows of your system talking with other systems. You should not necessarily go into the full detailed scope of your inner workings of your application or software, but at least your, I would say, your major touch points with external systems. It might be users, might be other systems, API endpoints, or other backend systems. At least those interfaces should be covered with an initial threat model. And then based on next sprints, next features, you might decide, okay, I need to dig deeper in parts of the threat model or the system.
Is there an agreed way to commit threat modeling results into a repository as code? People are always talking everything as code, infrastructure as code, this is code, that is code, so that I can commit maybe potential new threats alongside a feature that I've just implemented. Is there an agreed way to do that?
No. There's no, to my knowledge, there's no standard way of doing this, let alone agreed. So I would say any format that works within your, I would say, environment. What I've seen a lot, certainly in, for instance, like in the organizations that do, I would say, Jira-based tracking, is to have findings, I would say, tracked as a bug in a bug tracking system. So to keep at least to use the same kind of tools that developers are working on. In terms of like inline, there's a very interesting project called ThreatSpec by, the name will come up, but an English guy, a very smart guy, and he has released a second version of it. And there's an agreed upon, I would say, from his point of view for that project, some like a kind of meta labels that you can add to your code, where the ThreatSpec will parse that code. It's a small Python script and build a dynamic threat model out of that. But that's how ThreatSpec does it. Right? So there's other ways of doing, I would say, threat modeling as code. But that's, I would say, as close to your code that you can get, to my knowledge.
Okay. Great. So that's a question for me that, or I'm asking that question. Where is the border between bugs and flaws? So I've seen threat models where they're just very classic vulnerability classes in there, like SQL injection and process scripting. Is that something that we should be talking about in our threat model, or is it only about design flaws? Where is the border between those two things?
It's a hard question. If I needed to put that, it would be, bugs would be anything that you could automatically find with tools. At least, doing fuzzing, doing testing, source code reviews, dynamically testing, those typically will discover or uncover security bugs. I have yet to find a source code review tool that will find a threat model finding in terms of like you did not encrypt your password in your database, or you selected to do, or you opted for user ID password instead of MFA. That's not something your source code review tool will necessarily tell you. But depending on your threat model and your requirements, you will definitely, your threat modeling should uncover this.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Last question. No, next to last question, because one question just popped up by Thomas again. There's also an open source tool called Threagile for threat modeling as code. He says, not a question, but a hint. So that's something we could also post in the Meetup group so that everybody can relate directly to this.
Mm-hmm.
So a question again by myself. How can I deal with contradictory countermeasures? I'm thinking about the threat of somebody doing a brute force attack on my system. I would probably implement a user lockout, but that again poses the threat of an aggressor could potentially systematically lock out users. How can I deal with this contradiction of countermeasures?
Yeah. Obviously, when you go into mitigation strategies, you should weigh out your mitigations against each other and see how they. You should not try whenever you and that's the hard part of doing the threat modeling. When you start selecting mitigations, you have to make sure you are not introducing second order issues of implementing those kind of mitigations, because whenever you start a mitigation, it will be potentially be an extra feature, an extra part of like an aspect that can be attacked or abused in itself. So yeah, it's a question of combining best practices, but also understanding that whenever you start doing a mitigation, that it's even from like an organization point of view until like an operations impact, that you have to weigh the implications against each other of the mitigations you're going to implement for your application. And there is no straightforward way of doing that here. What you're saying is certainly true. You might cover one threat and one kind of attack scenario and open up a possibility for another, maybe denial of service scenario. So you always have to look at your mitigation and to adapt your threat modeling or do some kind of like simulation on your threat modeling. What would that mean in my overall security posture? Mm-hmm. But that is easier said than done. Huh?
Yes, it is. That's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Seba. I will hand over to Nicolas, who will present just very shortly what Sec4Dev is all about, and then we'll give away a free ticket. Nicolas.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Thomas. Just for you guys who haven't been to the Sec4Dev conferences so far, just a short introduction. It's a high-quality security conference for people all around involved in software development or who are interested to make code more secure and more reliable. Keynote this year, we are going to have Tanya Janka. She's an international renowned security specialist who is a great speaker. She also wrote Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, which was promoted today as the best security book to learn security from scratch. Was actually today promoted on Twitter as one of the best books for security. So take a look at her talk. Is going to be great. All around the topics are going to be application security, secure SDLC, testing, cloud container security, and machine learning, as well as IoT security. Just a short look out to our boot camps, which are hands-on security trainings for you. This is the hands-on AWS Cloud Security Bootcamp presented by Matthias Tausig and Martin Grottenthaler, who are both SBA research consultants and who are doing a great job in this bootcamp. The next one would be Philip Derrick, everybody who is involved in APIs, in API development, or in managing a development team, or who wants to make a single page application more secure should join this bootcamp. Philipp Dirk is a family member of Sec4Dev so far. It's already his third time to present and also to hold up a training. He's a great guy and he makes really awesome trainings.
We're cooperating with Belgian security folks a lot.
Yeah, it seems so.
Indeed.
We're quite popular with them. The next one would be a Kubernetes security deep dive, since Kubernetes is already a standard concerning container orchestration and is quite powerful. This bootcamp would be really good for you concerning learning best practices and other security features who help you to handle Kubernetes better in the future. All in all together, we have 4 days of Sec4Dev security goodness, 2 days bootcamp, and 2 days single track. 14 talks. We have a few breakout sessions where you can talk with different people on different topics around security and software development. Special this year, we have next year, sorry, 2021, we got the Software Security 101 Secure Coding Basics presented by Thomas Conrad. It's going to be a 3-hour session, and he will introduce the most important aspects of software security. As well, we're going to have Women in Tech, We Are No Aliens workshop discussion, panel discussion, as well as moderated by strong and successful women in IT. And it's for women, from women for women, so women only, but we're happy for everybody who wants to join one of those or both sessions. This is a picture from the last year's conference. Most people are very, very happy. I was a little bit exhausted already, if you see, if you find my face. It was a great conference this year, but next year we hope also when it's all virtual that you are going to join and have a lot of fun. And here, please, the last thing I would ask from you, if you want to have free or win a free conference ticket, please just take out your phone, just scan for a short time the QR code. You will go to a Twitter post from us, and you can please like and share this tweet, and then you will have the chance to win a ticket. Thomas and I will do the lottery in the upcoming days, and we will announce it.
We'll use a cryptographically secure random number generator, I swear. All right.
Yes.
Thanks everybody for joining.
I also have like a couple of like ending slides just with the links.
Oh yeah, wait. I will
just
last chance for scanning the link. I will give you 5 seconds.
Yes.
And okay.
Yes. Okay. So just to there's a couple of links I wanted to share just to make sure that you all have it. So I also want to thank the people within. There's quite a couple of people who've worked on that. These are the links: the GitHub links, the Threat Modeling Playbook link. If you want to reach to or find me on OWASP, OWASP.org, Toreon.com for work. We do have a Threat Modeling Insider newsletter where we, from time to time, post news around threat modeling, and we also have like online trainings which you can find here. And with that, I wish you a safe and healthy holiday.
Thank you very much, Seba. Thank you for being part again of this meetup. We are very happy always to have you. Great presentation and great insights. And thanks everybody, the meetup participants to join. Make sure to join the next meetup. It's going to be in January. Just subscribe to the meetup group and invite your colleagues and friends as well. We have great free content always here. And I'm going to be posting some links and references that we mentioned during the question and answer section in the meetup group. Have a nice Christmas. Have a nice Happy New Year as well for everybody whom I'm not going to see until then. And stay safe and stay healthy. See you next year, hopefully Sec4Dev. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.